Few songwriting partnerships have shaped popular music as profoundly as John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Together, they transformed the possibilities of rock and pop, creating a catalog that continues to inspire generations of musicians decades after the Beatles called it a day. Their success was built on contrast. McCartney's instinct for melody, harmony, and polished songcraft perfectly complemented Lennon's raw honesty and willingness to push creative boundaries. Rather than competing, their differences often strengthened one another, producing some of the most celebrated recordings in modern music. That creative chemistry, however, wasn't without its complications. Because Lennon and McCartney dominated the band's songwriting, George Harrison often found himself fighting for space on Beatles albums. As Bob Dylan once observed, who wouldn't get stuck behind those guys? Their partnership was so central to the band's identity that it naturally overshadowed everyone else. As the 1960s progressed, another challenge emerged. Lennon and McCartney were no longer moving in the same artistic direction. Their musical interests began to drift apart, and what one considered exciting, the other sometimes viewed with skepticism. Record labels still wanted the familiar Lennon-McCartney magic attached to every release, but behind the scenes, the two writers increasingly disagreed over the music they were creating. Those creative clashes became increasingly visible. John Lennon famously dismissed McCartney's "Hello, Goodbye," believing it prioritized commercial appeal over artistic substance. While Paul saw layers of meaning beneath its simple lyrics, Lennon wasn't convinced. "That's another McCartney," Lennon remarked. "Smells a mile away, doesn't it?" An attempt to write a single. It wasn't a great piece. The best bit was the end, which we all ad-libbed in the studio, where I played the piano. The criticism wasn't entirely one-sided. McCartney also found himself distancing from several Lennon-led compositions. Some songs left a bad impression because of difficult recording sessions, while others simply didn't align with his vision of what the Beatles should sound like. In Paul's view, not every experiment belonged on a Beatles record. By the time sessions began for the White Album in 1968, the band had embraced creative freedom more than ever before. Each member pursued increasingly individual ideas, resulting in one of the most adventurous albums of their career. But that freedom also made disagreements inevitable, particularly when deciding which experimental ideas truly represented the Beatles. No song illustrated that divide more dramatically than Revolution 9. The 8-minute avant-garde sound collage remains one of the most polarizing recordings in the Beatles' catalog. According to numerous accounts, McCartney strongly opposed including it on the White Album, believing it pushed too far beyond what the band represented. Although Paul has rarely spoken publicly about the song, former Beatles recording engineer Geoff Emerick described his reaction in Here, There, and Everywhere, My Life Recording the Music of the Beatles. Paul simply didn't see it as Beatles music, and he certainly didn't agree that it was the direction that the Beatles should go in. For Lennon, however, Revolution 9 represented something entirely different. He viewed it as one of his boldest artistic achievements, an experimental piece that abandoned conventional songwriting in favor of sound, atmosphere, and emotion. Speaking to Rolling Stone in 1970, Lennon explained, "Revolution 9 was an unconscious picture of what I actually think will happen when it happens, just like a drawing of a revolution." The disagreement perfectly illustrates both the strength and the weakness of the Beatles' creative philosophy. Their willingness to experiment allowed them to redefine popular music again and again, inspiring countless artists to think beyond traditional songwriting. At the same time, that same freedom created growing divisions as each Beatle developed a different vision of where the band should go next. Looking back today, the debate surrounding Revolution 9 captures the artistic crossroads the Beatles faced during their final years. What Lennon celebrated as fearless innovation, McCartney saw as something that no longer reflected the identity of the world's greatest rock band. Yet perhaps that very clash of perspectives is part of what made the Beatles unlike any other band before or since.